Hi, my name's Indigo. They say family's supposed to be your first safe place, but mine hated me for how I looked. Not because I did something wrong, but because I didn't fit their picture. They called me names behind my back, sometimes to my face. They cut me out of family photos, erased my name from school forms, even faked a social media account to humiliate me in front of everyone. I was 13 the first time my mom told me, "No one will ever want someone like you." And you know what's worse? I believed her, but something changed. Now they want back in. But where were they when I was disappearing? Where were they when they were the ones holding the scissors? Would you let them in? Would you forgive them if they never said sorry? It's funny what silence can teach you, not the kind you find in libraries or in the pause before sleep, but the kind that sinks into your bones, the kind you walk past every day without saying a word. That silence lived on the wall in our living room, right above the beige leather couch we were never allowed to sit on without asking. There were 13 photographs on that wall. I counted, twice a week, at least. Mom, smiling in a lavender dress. Callista, grinning with straight A's in her hands. Even the dog made it into 2 frames. I was in none of them, not even once. And it wasn't a mistake. Every time I'd mention it, Mom would wave me off. "You were probably behind the camera, sweetie," she said once, stirring her coffee with the same spoon she used to swat my hand away from the sugar jar. I wasn't behind any camera. I was usually just not invited. You start believing after a while that maybe you aren't supposed to be seen. It wasn't always like that, I think. I have vague memories of my dad's voice reading books late at night, calling me my little comet. But after he passed, something shifted. Grief twisted Darlene, my mother, into a woman who valued polish more than people. Callista became her mirror, and I became the smudge they wiped off every time company came over. But even smudges remember. Callista's 16th birthday party was the last time I ever believed there might still be a place for me in that house. I remember it was warm that day, a Nevada October heat that refused to act like fall. I wore a navy blue sweater and jeans that didn't fit right anymore, sleeves rolled up so I wouldn't stain them while helping with cupcakes. The house smelled like vanilla frosting and that expensive citrus cleaner Mom only used for parties. Balloons lined the railings. Everyone was there. Neighbors, her cheer squad, some boy named Dylan she had a crush on. I carried a tray of red velvet cupcakes into the dining room, trying to stay invisible. I bent over slightly to reach the table, and the wooden chair next to me let out the slightest creak. Mom didn't miss a beat. "Oh, don't break the chair, Piglet." She said it loud enough for the table to hear. Laughter bubbled from Callista and the others. Not nervous laughter, not the kind you give when someone says something awkward and you're not sure what to do. No, this was the kind of laughter that said, "We've all thought it, she just finally said it." I straightened up and walked out of the room. I didn't cry. That would have given them something to feel better about. I went upstairs, closed my door, and skipped dinner. Callista knocked once that night, not to apologize, just to ask if I'd seen her phone charger. That was the night I started disappearing, on purpose. No more asking to be in pictures. No more trying to sit at the table during holidays. I stopped checking the mailbox for birthday cards, stopped writing my name on the grocery list. The less I existed, the less they had to hide me. But the thing is, when you make yourself small long enough, you start to forget your real size. And still, I watched. I remembered. I noticed the way Mom only took photos from the left because that side's tighter. The way Callista reheated her coffee 3 times before taking 1 sip, as if needing warmth but never accepting it. I saw the cracks in their perfection. I didn't hate them. Not yet. I just stopped believing I was one of them. One afternoon, weeks after that party, I came home to find Mom rearranging the living room wall. She had a new frame in her hand. I paused, heart stupidly hopeful for a moment. She turned and said, "We finally found a good shot of Bailey," referring to our dog. That frame still hangs, center right at eye level. Bailey in a little Christmas sweater, tongue out. There are now 14 frames. Sometimes I imagined what my frame would have looked like if it had ever existed. Maybe me at the beach, hair tangled by the wind, not posing, just real, maybe with Dad. But daydreams fade fast when you're feeding them alone. At night, I'd lie in bed and repeat a promise, not to them, but to myself. One day, I'd have a wall of my own, not filled with perfect smiles or curated memories, but truth. People who showed up, people who stayed. I'd hang it where everyone could see it, not to prove anything to them, but to remind myself that I was never the problem. That party wasn't just Callista's 16th, it was the day I stopped waiting for them to make room. That was the last time I let them laugh while I stayed silent. They didn't even notice when I stopped speaking. After that party, the one where I became the punchline, I faded out of conversations, skipped movie nights, didn't bother asking to be included in anything anymore. You'd think someone would ask why, but silence is comfortable for people who already pretend you're not there. The next time I thought maybe I could belong was the winter recital. We had to wear something formal, and I didn't want to borrow Callista's old stuff, not that she'd offer, so I started saving. Every lunch period, I'd buy the smallest thing on the menu and pocket the rest of my change. It took months, but I did it. I bought a navy blue dress from a clearance rack at a store downtown. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't tight, it was just me, clean lines, soft fabric. Something I could feel good in without needing anyone's approval. I kept it in the back of my closet, hidden beneath old hoodies. I planned to try it on again that Sunday night. Make sure it still fit, maybe take a photo, just to remind myself that sometimes I could look like someone worth noticing. But when I opened my closet, it was gone. At first, I thought maybe I moved it and forgot. I tore through drawers, under the bed, checked the laundry. Even though I hadn't worn it yet, I didn't say anything at dinner. I was still trying to convince myself I'd find it, but I knew. Somewhere deep down, I already knew. The next morning, Callista walked into the kitchen in my dress, except it wasn't mine anymore. It had been tailored, hemmed shorter, the waist pulled in. She paired it with heels and smiled like she'd invented elegance. Darlene looked up from her tablet just long enough to say, "At least someone can make that thing look decent." That was it. No explanation. No apology, just a jab and a sip of coffee. I remember the way Callista looked at me, not smug, not apologetic, just blank, like I was a piece of furniture in the room, irrelevant to the moment. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I nodded slowly, picked up my orange juice, and took it back to my room. I didn't even bother closing the door behind me. That night, I scrolled through photos of the recital outfits people posted online. I didn't go. I told my music teacher I was sick. She didn't question it. A few weeks later, parent-teacher night rolled around. Callista was dressed like she was running for office. Blazer, pearls, hair perfectly curled. Darlene looked proud, striding down the hallway of our high school like she owned the building. Teachers rushed to greet her. "You must be Callista's mom. She's just incredible." I stood a few feet behind, wearing jeans and a sweater with a threadbare sleeve. Nobody noticed me. When they finally reached my homeroom, the counselor extended a hand to Darlene and asked, "And you're Indigo's mother?" Darlene gave a half smile and said, "I don't have a child in that program." It wasn't a slip of the tongue, it wasn't tired sarcasm, it was a deliberate choice to erase me again. I nodded at the counselor, barely smiling, and walked away. There weren't enough chairs in the hall, so I leaned against the wall near the vending machine. I stood there the rest of the night, counting ceiling tiles and pretending I wasn't invisible. The next morning, I opened a blank folder on my laptop. I didn't label it anything dramatic. I just called it "For Later." Inside, I created a document. The first entry: Event, Parent-Teacher Night, Statement: I don't have a child in that program. Date: March 12th. Then I added another one: Event, Navy dress removed from closet, worn by Callista next day. Altered. Every slight, every theft, every dismissal. I recorded them. It wasn't about revenge. It was about clarity. I knew that one day they might act shocked, act like I'd turned cold overnight. I wanted something to point to, not for them, but for me. Proof that it wasn't all in my head. Some evenings, I'd open that folder and reread the entries, not to torture myself, but to remember that forgetting was how it all started. They forgot to love me. I forgot how to expect better, but I wouldn't forget again. Some things you don't forgive, not because you can't, but because they never said sorry. She took my application, but she couldn't stop what I was starting to become. It started with a question, just a simple, confused glance from my guidance counselor as I passed her in the hall. I was heading to chemistry, hoodie pulled tight, backpack slouched, like I didn't care, but she stopped me with a hand on my arm. "Hey, Indigo," she said gently. "I'm sorry the program didn't work out. I was surprised when I heard you withdrew." Withdrew? I blinked. My lips parted, but I couldn't form words right away. "I never withdrew," I finally managed. I was still waiting to hear back. She looked puzzled, even concerned. "They said your guardian emailed and asked to remove your name from the applicant list." I nodded slowly, pretending I understood, even though my heart had already slipped into my stomach. I walked to class in a fog, barely hearing the announcements, barely registering the scrape of metal desk legs on tile. That night, after reheating leftovers no one else wanted, I waited until Darlene and Callista had gone to bed. Their bedroom doors closed with that soft, definitive click I had come to know as a signal. You're free to exist, for now. I sat at the kitchen island and opened the family laptop, the old one we all still used for bills, appointments, shared things, as Darlene once put it. It was slow, with a missing shift key and a cracked screen, but it worked. I typed in the scholarship board's email domain. Search bar. No results. Then I tried the trash folder. There it was. Subject line: Withdrawal request for Indigo Harris, confirmation. The message was polite, sterile, professional. It said they had processed the request and were sorry she'd be withdrawing her application, dated 3 weeks ago, time-stamped 9:47 a.m. That's when I remembered. Darlene had called in sick to work that morning. She'd made pancakes, smiled more than usual, asked if I wanted blueberries on mine. I didn't confront her. There was no dramatic shouting match, no overturned furniture, no tears. Just the soft whir of the refrigerator, the glow of the screen, and a stillness inside me I couldn't quite explain. It wasn't sadness. It was recognition. I saved the email, forwarded it to my personal account, took a screenshot, created a folder titled "They Always Knew." I didn't even bother renaming it later. Then I went outside. It had started raining, a rare event in Henderson. Light droplets tapped the wooden deck, glistening in the porch light like scattered glass. I stepped onto the cool boards barefoot, the cold biting but welcome. I stood there, arms crossed, letting the drizzle trace lines down my face and arms. My mind wasn't racing anymore. It had slowed to a pace I could walk alongside. I whispered into the dark, not because I thought anyone was listening, but because I needed to hear it aloud. If my dreams embarrass you that much, I'll build new ones, but not for you. Inside, the dishwasher hummed. Somewhere upstairs, Callista's phone buzzed with another notification. Darlene probably dreamed sweet dreams, certain her family was intact, her image preserved. But that night, something shifted. I wasn't going to ask again. Not for permission, not for space, not for love. I started spending more time in the art room at school, even though I wasn't officially enrolled in the class. Mrs. Vernon didn't mind. She let me sketch in the back, near the windows. I didn't talk much, and she didn't ask me to. I brought my own supplies, cheap graphite pencils, a fading sketchbook, and started drawing places I'd never been. Mountains, a cabin by a lake, a single tree in an empty field. Sometimes I drew doorways, always open, always leading somewhere else. I kept my voice quiet, but my lines grew louder. I never mentioned the scholarship again, not to the counselor, not to Callista, and definitely not to Darlene. They didn't need to know what I was planning, not anymore. That spring, I started applying for other programs, on my own. I used a friend's computer at the library, created a new email address they didn't know about. I didn't leave applications on the counter. Didn't ask for signatures. Some bridges weren't meant to be walked back across, some fires you don't put out, and some futures, no matter how much someone tries to erase them, are already sketched in permanent ink. So I kept drawing, kept filling that sketchbook with places I imagined myself escaping to. But what I never saw coming was how someone else might see me right where I was. It started with the library. Most kids saw it as detention without the label, but I treated it like a sanctuary. Lunch hour was loud everywhere else, girls fixing lipstick in bathroom mirrors, boys shouting over vending machines. But the library gave me something no one in my house ever had. Quiet without tension. The kind of silence that lets your shoulders drop instead of tighten. I picked the farthest table by the windows. Light poured in around 12:10 every day, warming the table just enough to make the world feel bearable. I'd read or draw. Or sometimes just rest my forehead on my arms and listen to my own breathing. That's when I noticed him, Ray. He wasn't loud, wasn't the type to stare either, just always, around, 2 tables away. Sometimes he sketched, sometimes he typed into a battered old laptop with the corner taped up. I didn't know what he was working on, and I didn't ask. We existed in parallel, no words, no pressure. Until one Thursday afternoon, I was halfway through reading a short story for class when he passed my table on his way out. As he walked by, he slowed, tapped his knuckle lightly on the wood, and said, "You look peaceful here." Then he left. No smirk, no sarcasm, just 5 words that stuck to the inside of my chest like honey on a spoon. The next week, he emailed me a photo. I didn't even know he had my school email, but I wasn't mad. The subject line just said, "Thought you might want this." It was me. Sitting at that table, head tilted slightly, sunlight wrapping around my shoulders. A book lay open in front of me, and I was smiling. Not a big grin, just this soft upturn in my lips like I had forgotten, for a second, that I needed to be guarded. I stared at that photo for a long time, because I didn't recognize myself, and I mean that in the best way. That version of me wasn't shrinking or apologizing. She wasn't bracing for impact. She looked like someone who belonged somewhere, someone who could be seen. Later that evening, I logged into the school's creative arts forum. Ray had uploaded the photo there, under Portraits of Quiet. The comments flooded in. Who is she? This feels like sunlight turned into a person. She looks real, not posed, not filtered, just real. I didn't reply. I didn't click like, but I read them. every single one, twice. That night, I saved the image to my phone, not under downloads or a random album. I made a folder called When I Forgot, and that photo was the only thing in it. By the next week, more people started looking at me differently in the hallways. Not mockingly, just curious. Some smiled in passing, a few whispered and glanced. I didn't know what story they had in their heads, but it wasn't the one I'd grown up with. Then Darlene found out. She was scrolling her phone at breakfast, flipping through whatever local forums she haunted between her Pilates class ads and Pinterest boards for living room updates. Suddenly she frowned. "Is this you?" she asked, holding up her screen. The image was cropped, but it was clearly my face. I nodded once, kept eating. She scoffed, dropped the phone face down and muttered, "Well, it's not like your model material." The fork didn't shake in my hand. My voice didn't crack. I didn't retreat. Instead, I looked up for the first time in years, really looked at her, and said calmly, "You've never seen me clearly anyway." The silence that followed wasn't the usual tight-lipped kind we lived in. It was heavier, like the room itself wasn't sure how to react. Callista stopped scrolling her own phone mid-swipe. Darlene's fork clinked as it slipped from her grip onto her plate. She didn't pick it up. I stood, took my plate to the sink, rinsed it clean, and left. Later, as I walked back into the library, Ray gave me a short nod. No words, just a kind of knowing. We didn't need to speak about the photo, or the comments, or what my mother said. He had seen me before I believed I could be seen. And for Darlene, that was the scariest thing of all. They saw me before I even believed in myself, and that terrified her. The next morning came too quietly. I'd gotten used to the subtle shifts in energy around the house, Callista's heels clicking toward the bathroom, Darlene's phone buzzing on the charger, the smell of burnt toast no one ever ate. But that morning, it was as if everything had been carefully arranged in anticipation. I walked into the kitchen half expecting the usual silence or eye rolls. Instead, on the table, right next to my bowl of cereal, sat a manila envelope with a pale pink sticky note. "We're proud of you. Let's do this right. Love, Mom." I didn't touch it right away. Just stared at it, then glanced around like it might be a joke, some twisted test to see how desperate I was for approval. I opened it slowly. Inside was a typed contract, real letterhead, real language, real enough to make my fingers tighten as I read. It named Darlene Harris as my representative for all future media, promotional, or business inquiries. 70% of earnings to her, 30 to me. In bold font, one line read, "This arrangement is made in recognition of the family's foundational role in the subject's development and potential success." Development? Success? Foundational? I heard movement behind me. Callista. She didn't look at me. She just breezed by, poured her almond milk into a glass like she lived in a commercial, then glanced over her shoulder. At least sign fast before they realize it's a fluke. I folded the contract neatly and held it in my lap. Not ripped, not crumpled, just restrained. My hands stayed steady, even as the pressure behind my ribs throbbed. I found Darlene in the sunroom. She was on the phone, laughing, something about a friend's new kitchen backsplash. She ended the call and looked up at me, all sweet composure. "I figured we'd need to get ahead of this, sweetheart. Media's fast. People reach out. I just want to protect you from things you're not ready for." I held up the contract. Protect me or own me? Her smile froze. "Don't be dramatic. This is how business works. I'm 17. You'll thank me one day. I'll stay broke before I stay bought." She rolled her eyes and reached for her coffee. "You're too young to understand how real life works, Indigo. You think clicks and compliments are enough to build something real. You'd be nowhere without this family." Funny, I said, lowering the contract onto her magazine stack. That's exactly how you treat me. I turned and walked out before she could retort. The air in the hallway was cooler, sharper, like I'd cracked a window no one wanted open. Upstairs, I laid the contract on my bed and took a picture with my phone. Then I folded it again, slid it into a mailer, and wrote my own name in block letters on the front. I mailed it to myself. Certified. Date stamped. Proof. Later that afternoon, I met Ray at the public library. We didn't sit in the usual back corner. I needed space, light, the sound of keys tapping from other people's laptops, life moving around me. I handed him the envelope with the photo and told him everything. Well, he said, scanning the contract's wording, at least they're consistent. You think I'm overreacting? He tilted his head. No, I think you're just finally reacting. We sat in silence a while. I didn't need advice, just to not be alone in it. That night, I opened my document folder, the one I started months ago. For later, I added a new line, event, contract drafted without my consent. Purpose, exploitation masked as support. Date, April 3rd. Then, for the first time, I added a second line underneath. Response, rejected. Evidence archived. No longer silent. Something in me settled after that. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was clarity, a boundary drawn, not screamed. I didn't need a headline moment. Just a line in the sand. That was the last time they'd try to put a price tag on me. That account was fake. But everything I was about to do next? That would be real. The warning came through a text. I was in the middle of study hall, eyes half focused on a history worksheet, when my phone buzzed twice under the desk. It was Ava, a girl from math class. We weren't close, but she was kind, one of the few who didn't pretend I didn't exist. She sent a screenshot. It was a meme, harsh, cruel, a side-by-side of two girls, one plus size, one slim, with a caption that said, "Guess which one never got asked to prom?" Below it, in bold letters, posted by @indigoharris.official. My name, my photo in the corner, my identity. I stared at it so long I didn't realize I'd stopped breathing. I didn't say anything out loud, just picked up my stuff and left the room. Nobody stopped me, not the teacher, not the classmates who'd probably seen it too. In the back stairwell near the gym, I pulled up the profile. Sure enough, the account existed. Same name. A few older photos, nothing incriminating, just copied from school directories or my art portfolio. But the bio read, "Keeping it real. If you're triggered, that's on you." And the posts? They got worse. Fat-shaming memes, mocking quotes, snarky comments, all written to sound like I was attacking girls who looked like me. Within minutes, students were commenting, some tagging my real account. "This you?" Others just laughed or reposted, because that's what people do when they think it's a joke and not a person. But I knew one thing instantly. I didn't create that account, and I knew exactly who did. Callista had access to everything. Photos, old usernames. She'd joked before about people needing to be humbled. She'd said it when a girl posted swimsuit pics on spring break. Said it when a freshman wore a bodycon dress to school. Said it about me, under her breath, just loud enough for Mom to hear. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I opened a clean browser, created a new folder on my flash drive, and started documenting screenshots, URLs, timestamps. Then I dug deeper. It didn't take long. The email connected to the fake account. A secondary Gmail address I recognized. Callista used it when she wanted to join influencer sweepstakes. Same recovery number, same birthday listed. That night, the house was quiet. Dinner had been rushed. Darlene had her usual wine, and Callista was out with friends. probably refreshing her notifications. I filed the report. Social media platforms move fast when legal terms get used. I didn't need a lawyer. I just needed to sound like one. This account is impersonating a minor and causing reputational harm. I have proof of IP overlaps and secondary email ownership. Please escalate to your abuse team. 20 hours later, the account was gone. The next evening, Callista came home storming through the front door, slammed her keys on the entryway table, marched straight to my room without knocking. "What the hell is your problem?" I looked up from my desk. Calm, steady. "Come again?" "You got the page taken down. Everyone thinks I'm some psycho now." "Maybe because you are," I said flatly. She stepped forward. "Why are you always so dramatic? You could have just asked me." I raised an eyebrow. "Asked you? To stop pretending to be me so you could bully other girls?" Her mouth twisted, then dropped open, but no sound came. "I didn't even tell anyone it was you," I added. "Yet." She flinched. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I leaned forward. "Because if you keep this up, I will post the proof. All of it. Every link, every screenshot, every little digital footprint you forgot to wipe." She didn't say another word. She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her like that might undo the damage she'd done. Later that week, she gave a speech at the Henderson Youth Gala. She wore a white dress and opened with a story about resilience. Thanked Darlene for her support. Thanked her drama coach, even thanked the family dog who'd been dead for years. She didn't mention me, not once. I watched the live stream from my laptop, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor. I didn't expect a thank you. I didn't even want one. But what I did want, what I gave myself, was evidence. I recorded the speech, stored it. Event, Youth Gala speech. Recognition, none. Family revisionism confirmed. They wanted a version of the family that didn't include me, and if that's what they wanted, they'd get it. Only now, I'd be writing my own version. That account was fake, but everything I was about to do next, that would be real. They built a house of lies, and I was finally holding the match. Mother's Day came quietly that year. Darlene never liked making a fuss about it, unless it was her bragging to other women about how both of her daughters knew how to honor their mother right. I used to believe it meant something, until I realized the only gifts she kept were the ones that made her look good in public. Still, I tried. That Sunday morning, I packed a small white box with care. Inside was a photo collage I'd made. Myself, Callista, and Darlene. But this time, I included a picture no one had seen before. It was a candid of me from the library, the one Ray had taken. I didn't add filters. I didn't try to make myself smaller. Just me. In my own corner of light, I printed a note. "Happy Mother's Day. I'm still part of this story, whether you frame it or not." I left it on the kitchen counter, ribbon and all. By Monday afternoon, it was back in my room, box unopened, the note taped over with one of her sticky yellows. Scrawled in red ink, underlined twice, "Don't try to belong where you never fit." I stared at it for a solid minute, no emotion, just facts. She had made her position clear. Again. That night, I pulled the old USB stick from the back of my drawer, the one I hadn't touched in over a year. I plugged it in and scrolled past hundreds of files, photos, screenshots. But there was one folder labeled Birthday Callista 16. Inside it, a 17-second audio clip. I remembered that moment too well. I had carried a tray of snacks into the dining room during Callista's party. Someone made a joke about food, and Darlene, without missing a beat, laughed and said, "Don't break the chair, Piglet." The laughter that followed wasn't awkward. It was complicit. I didn't cry then, and I wouldn't now. Instead, I pulled up the parenting conference's contact page. Their featured speaker list was posted online. Darlene's face stared back at me under the headline, "Raising Resilient Daughters in a Digital Age." The irony almost made me laugh. I attached the clip to a new email. Short, direct. "I believe you should know what your invited speaker considers acceptable parenting. This clip is from her daughter's 16th birthday. She was referring to me." Within 4 hours, I got a reply from the conference director. "Thank you for your concern. The speaking engagement has been revoked, effective immediately." The next morning, the house was a minefield. Darlene was pacing in the kitchen, cordless phone pressed to her cheek, voice sharper than usual. When she saw me, she ended the call mid-sentence. "What did you do?" I placed my bag on the counter and met her stare. "I told the truth." "You had no right to ruin this for me. Do you know how long I've worked to build credibility? You ruined it yourself. I just sent the receipt." Her jaw tightened. "You've always been ungrateful." I didn't flinch. "And you've always been fake." Callista entered then, mid-scroll on her phone. She didn't look up, but her eyebrows dipped. "Did you seriously send that? You know you embarrassed her, right?" I turned to her. "She called me a piglet in front of 20 people. That wasn't embarrassing?" Callista opened her mouth to argue, then paused. For once, she had nothing ready, no spin, no shrug, no eye roll. I looked back at Darlene. "You've rewritten everything about me for years. My voice, my presence, even how you speak about me in public. You made me feel like a ghost in my own house." Silence. Heavy. Dense. Not even the refrigerator dared to hum. "But I'm not invisible," I added. "And I'm not playing your shadow anymore." I picked up my bag and walked to the door. My hands weren't shaking. Behind me, I heard Callista's voice, low, barely audible. "She's different." Darlene didn't answer. For the first time, I realized they weren't scared of losing me. They were scared of me being heard, and I was just getting started. They built a house of lies, and I was finally holding the match. I didn't burn bridges. I built a door and closed it behind me. The day after I submitted my last college essay, I sat through my final scholarship interview in a windowed room downtown. The panelists were polite, dressed in earth tones, their pens clicking in unison like a metronome for my nerves. I answered their questions with calm confidence, discussed my portfolio, my goals, the quiet fire behind every sketch. They nodded, took notes, and one of them leaned forward. "You didn't list a parent or guardian on any of your documents," she said. "Just your name? Was that an oversight?" I looked at her without blinking. "No." I raised myself. There was a pause, brief but heavy. The oldest man in the room smiled. "Thank you for being honest." That afternoon, I received the confirmation email. Full scholarship. Art and design. Out of state. No strings. I stared at it until my eyes burned, then forwarded the message to one address only, my own. 2 days later, I launched my platform. It wasn't flashy, just a clean web page, a short bio, and a quote. "You don't have to be seen by the people who erased you. Be visible anyway." I included drawings, snippets of essays, and one photo, Ray's, the one from the library. Not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me who I became the moment I stopped apologizing for existing. The brand name, Indigo Harris. No middle name, no fluff, just my full name, Darlene's last name included. When a local journalist reached out for a short piece on student creators, she asked, "Why keep the last name?" I didn't hesitate. So they remember what they lost when they chose silence over support. By the end of that week, traffic on the site picked up. Comments trickled in. Teachers shared the page. Old classmates messaged quietly, some with congratulations, others with vague guilt. Then, Darlene called a dinner. I hadn't sat down at that table in months, but this time, I went. I knew what was coming. The air felt rehearsed. Napkins folded, plates matched, Callista too quiet. We ate in silence for 10 minutes. Then Darlene cleared her throat. We know things have been strained, but we're still family, and family should be together, especially now that things are going so well for you. I laid my fork down. What exactly do you mean by together? Callista jumped in. It would look better publicly if we supported you more visibly. Like, maybe we could do a joint interview, or be at the launch event? I laughed once, short, dry. So this is about appearances, not accountability. Darlene pressed her lips. It's not about control, Indigo. It's about unity. Unity implies there was a we, I said. There never was. There was you and Callista, and me watching from the hallway. Callista folded her arms. You're being unfair. No, I said, pulling a small envelope from my bag. This is fair. I slid it across the table toward Darlene. She looked down. Her name printed neatly on the front. She opened it, read in silence. Legal notice of independence. I had filed through the state. At 17 and 9 months, with full scholarship and proof of financial stability, I could legally declare myself free of parental control. Darlene's hands shook slightly as she set the paper down. You're cutting us off? She whispered. I'm giving you what you wanted, I said. A version of me that no longer asks for love or permission. Callista stared like she was trying to memorize my face. I stood, straightened my jacket, slid my phone into my pocket. You made sure I knew my place. I've made sure you know where I stand. As I stepped toward the door, Darlene's voice followed. Soft, controlled. You'll regret this. Life's hard without a family. I turned, looked her in the eye. Life was harder with one that never wanted me. Outside, the sun was setting, gold behind the rooftops, warm against my face. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel bitter. I felt mine. I didn't burn bridges. I built a door and closed it behind me. I didn't burn bridges. I built a door and closed it behind me. And when that door shut, there was no echo, just peace. It's been 1 year. I now live in a modest one-bedroom apartment above a used bookstore in Reno. The building creaks when the wind pushes too hard, and the plumbing groans when it feels ignored. But it's mine. No one stomps down the hallway with demands. No one reroutes my mail or speaks over my name. I take morning classes at the community college 3 blocks down. In the afternoons, I work on my platform, writing, drawing, mentoring. The nights are mine. Sometimes I spend them reading. Other times, I volunteer at a youth center. Girls come in with the same questions I used to whisper into my pillow. Is it my fault? Am I unlovable? Will I ever get out? I don't have all the answers, but I sit beside them. I listen. I remind them that survival isn't weakness, it's proof. The first check I ever got from a sponsor, I didn't spend on clothes or electronics. I bought a sturdy wooden desk, the kind that doesn't wobble. On it, I placed one photo, just one, Ray's photo, the one from the library, where the light caught me like it had been waiting for that exact moment. He transferred schools before we ever had the chance to talk about anything beyond books and nods. Life does that sometimes. Closes a chapter before you're done reading it, but that photo stayed. It's my anchor. It reminds me not of who I was, but of who I started to believe I could become. Last month, an email came through. The subject line was bland, checking in. It was from Darlene. We miss you. Your sister wants to reconnect. There's space for you if you're ready to come home. I didn't answer. Not out of bitterness, but because I've learned that not all messages require replies. Some things are better left marked as read and archived. I didn't forward it, didn't screenshot it for my folder. I simply closed it, then went back to editing my next post. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. I know now that I don't need them to witness my progress for it to be real. I don't owe them a front row seat to the life I'm rebuilding. That evening, I sat at the desk and opened a blank page. The cursor blinked patiently, waiting, and I wrote, "To anyone who's ever been told they were too loud, too fat, too emotional, too inconvenient, don't apologize for your existence. Don't shrink so others can stay comfortable. If they couldn't see your worth, that's their limitation, not yours. Build a life so full, so bold, so unmistakably yours. They'll need sunglasses just to glance your way." I hit publish, closed my laptop. Then I made tea, opened the window, let the spring breeze carry my words wherever they were meant to land. Outside, the city lights blinked quietly. I didn't feel invisible, or excluded, or lacking. I felt whole. They hated me for my body, but it carried me farther than their love ever could. No matter how loud the world shouts about what you're not, the most powerful voice is still your own. This story wasn't just about family betrayal. It was about reclaiming identity, standing firm in self-worth, and walking away from anything that demanded you shrink to stay. So here's a question. Have you ever had to cut ties with someone you thought would always be there? Drop your story in the comments. We read every one. And if this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe. More real stories, more truth, and more healing are on the way.